morning, everyone. On behalf of Connect Groups and Alternatives to Suicide, WA Alliance, I warmly welcome you to the launch of the Alternatives to Suicide program. My name is Rena D'Souza, and I am the ATS Program Launch. I'd like to begin today's proceedings by acknowledging that we are on this beautiful project in our country. I'd like to pay respects to the culture and to the elders of the past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to pay respects to people with lived experience, their families, carers, and friends. The voice of people with lived experience is instrumental in the development of our work, and we value the contribution and knowledge. For some of us, this may be your first time here at the Rise, and for others, returning visitors. So for the benefit of all, I'm just going to go through some housekeeping guidelines. Please ensure that you have all signed in the contact register by signing in to the Safe WA app. Restrooms, very important, are outside these doors to the left, around the corridor. In the unlikely case of an emergency, please kindly make your way downstairs to the reception, and the staff here will ensure that you are guided to the muster point. And normally, it's at this time, traditionally, I would ask all of you to put away your mobile phones. Well, I'm breaking away with all traditions. I'm going to ask you to actually take out your mobile phones for me. There are around 90 of us in this room, people over 90, and I'll endeavor to catch up with all of you at some point at the end of the event. But for now, just to kind of get a snapshot in terms of who you are, where you're from, and why you're here today, we're just going to do a small exercise, and that would involve logging into the app called Slido. So we can do it out of two ways. One, open up the camera application on your phone, aim it to the barcode on the screen, which would take you directly to Slido. Alternatively, go to your web browser, type in Slido, and then it will ask you to put in the password, and it will be ATS. So I'll just give you a few minutes. How's everyone going? Not way? That's right. Take your time. So you can either go to Chrome or Firefox, type in login Slido, S-L-I-D-O, if the barcode doesn't work. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start up with a few warm-up questions just to see how this all works. So just get a feel of the personalities in this room. And first question is, are you a dog person or a cat person? Think twice about this answer, people. Looks like dogs are ruling. Okay. Good. All right, let's move to the second one. Very important. Does pineapple belong on a pizza? Oh, oh, that's like huge. Okay. Maybe you have the wrong crowd today. No. I think we. Oh, is Still going up? Brilliant, I think we all are warmed up. Okay. To which stakeholder category do you belong? There is another option in case. What did representatives here? All right. So we'll go to others. Support group founders, support group, academic researchers, person with individual experience. Brilliant. We'll go to the next question. Why are you here today? Brilliant. So, wanting lots of information on the ATS program, curious. That's fantastic. So we're going to, with the rest of the program, answer many of the questions, give you a deeper insight into the ATS program. So without further ado, to help me continue with today's proceedings, I'd like to introduce, oh, there's one more. Oh, sorry. Are you familiar with the ATS model? Deeper insight to the ATS models, that's what you're going to get in the rest of the program. So without further ado, I'd like to invite the CEO of Connect Groups, Antonella Segre, to take on.
Thank you. Hello. I know that Rena's really subdued, but I'm not, so I'm just going to sort of bring up the tempo in regards to that. It's so important to know who is in the room today, so, and also your level of understanding, so that we make sure that when you leave, you actually feel that you are well informed. That's the whole point of today. But it's an interesting 67% of you are here because you want more information. 13%, which is fantastic, are really becoming interested in becoming a facilitator of this model, and 9%, which is the reality why this model has been brought to WA, is that you're looking for a support group of this kind. So that's telling us in the Alliance that we're doing what we're meant to be doing today. My staff will be very shocked. I've actually prepared what I was going to say today. I tend to just sort of go off the cuff, but there's just too much that needs to be said that I had to make sure that I wasn't going to forget, and my age is going to show because I can't read without my glasses. But the problem when I have my glasses, I can't see any of you, so I don't know which is best. So welcome to the official launch of the Alternatives to Suicide program. I wish to recognize all those that are here with us today. Clearly there is a strong interest in the model, and your attendance is a testament that we are far from adequately addressing suicide distress, and that there is room for new models which focus on peer-to-peer support in an effective and meaningful way. So My name is Antonella, and I am the CEO of Connect Groups. And not all of you would know, but Connect Groups is the peak body for support groups in WA. And one of our key priorities, and I've been leading this organization for 13 years, and 13 may not be a lucky number, which means I have to stay for the 14th, is to raise the voice of peer support group sector and the role that they do play in the recovery journey. The Alternatives to Suicide model is an innovative American model that focuses on connection and relationship building among those who are struggling. A safe space where peers can share openly and authentically their suicidal thoughts and feelings. The model focuses on the why they are having such thoughts, and it is a demedicalized approach. I do wish to acknowledge my alliance partners, Joe Kalia from Recovery Matters, Debbie Charles from Helping Minds, Nitlin Millett from the Australian Childhood Foundation, but who was a strong and integral part of actually getting this program off the ground within her role at Mercy Care. Shona Gabler from Comwa, Emery, who's not with us today, Leo from Discharge, and David Cox from Curtin University, who again was unable to join us. I am really pleased to say that today we have with us Lorna Pritchard and Pauline Logan from Lottery West, who are our key partners in this second phase of the program and who have really been part of this long journey. Other acknowledgements before I go into sort of why we're here is to Louise Howe from the Mental Health Commission, Kay Pack from the Office of Chief Psychiatrist, Gilly Anderson from the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists, Gerard Tongs from the Order of St. John Hospitalier, and Lena Hopkinson from St. Bart's. Could I just ask my alliance partners to stand just so that you know who they are, and I'm sure you'll want to have some conversations. Lynn's hiding in the back, though she's, as I said, key, and just so that you knew who they were. Thank you. I'd also like to thank, yes, I do. As you hear about the journey, you'll want to applaud them even more. I also like to thank, and it's clear we saw it, all the NGOs and peak bodies that are in the room. And I really want to thank you for coming. But it is with great appreciation that I really welcome those with a lived experience, because the work that we're doing is for you. My role this morning is just to take you through the journey and where we are today, and what the Alliance's implementation strategy is for the next 12 months, and the role also that you can all play within this model. So, like all stories, we've got to begin from somewhere, and this story, will be hard to believe, began in November 2015. So how, I know I got an thank you. That shows perseverance, doesn't it? When Joe Kalia, the then CEO of Richmond Wellbeing, attended the Hearing Voices Congress in Barcelona, Spain, how wonderful was it that we could just get on a plane and go to Barcelona? It just seems like a world away, doesn't it? And he attended, at that time, the Alternatives to Suicide workshop. Joe subsequently, not because he attended the workshop, but as I wrote, it seems like he attended the workshop and then resigned from Richmond Wellbeing. But even when he left Richmond Wellbeing, and you may not all know, but Joe Kalia actually brought the Hearing Voices Network to Australia. So he definitely receives an applause for that. And therefore, when he left, he continued and had this drive to bring the alternatives model to WA. In February 2017, after a strong partnership with Mercy Care and other government and non-government organizations whose list is too long to read out, a forum was held in this precise location where the two key trainers from the USA Western Mass, now it's called Wildflower, showcased the model to over 400 attendees. So it was at that precise time that it was clear that there was an interest. And across that time, 5 other events, targeted events, took place. So the response was, and the interest was overwhelming. and a clear indicator that a strategy was needed to sustain and embed the peer-based model in WA. Now we move to May 2017, when the Alternatives to Suicide Steering Committee was formed, comprising of peak consumer bodies, Connect Groups, COMWA, Helping Minds, Dental Health and Suicide Prevention Australia, 2 consumers, and a family member were chosen as individual members. And the lead agency at that time, rightly so, was Mercy Care. We fast forward a bit, there's a lot happening in between, but we fast forward now to March 2018, when funding was sourced once again through the NGO sector to bring back to Perth the 2 trainers with the main objective of establishing an alternative to suicide facilitator workforce. A series of events were also scheduled, which were very well attended. Half-day forums in Kwinana, in Perth, half-day conversations. There was a youth forum, and the trainers actually had an opportunity to meet with the Mental Health Commissioner and Honourable Roger Cook. At that time, 20 facilitators were trained, and out of that, 1 peer group was formed, Discharged, which was deriving from one of our member groups, Trans Folk. The steering committee soon learned that there needed to be more of a centralized, coordinated approach, and that the facilitators could not be expected to individually source funding for hire, for debriefing, for ongoing training. The committee also recognized that some form of evidence base was required in order for us to progress the model, because as you all know, there's always a call for things to be evidence-based, even when we know that they're working. And through Connect Groups, where we offer small grants to our support group members, we were able to fund Discharged to engage Curtin University to conduct an evaluation of the Discharged Suicide Peer Support Group. And I won't be speaking to this because we have one of the founders of Discharged that will really speak to that more eloquently than myself. So there was a lot of learnings from the steering group, but we stuck together and we just kept on strategizing, and we knew that there was a need and we knew that there was a demand. So in 2019, Lottery West came to the negotiation table, and we were then armed with research findings, letter of support from the Mental Health Commissioner, and we were then invited to put in a grant. By this time, Connect Groups had taken on the role of lead agency, as the committee identified that us being the peak body of peer support groups in WA, we were best. It was a good fit, and to in the future be able to give the model a home. However, we all know COVID-19 did slow down the process, and the model itself had to be reviewed several times. But finally, in November 2020, the funding was granted, and here we are. And it was a great moment for the steering group that Lottery West really also saw how this sat within the COVID-19 recovery, because we are all well aware of the mental health impact and also increase in suicide during this time. So this was a huge sign of belief in the work that the steering group and that Discharged, as there were, by this point we had 3 groups running. So 2 that sat under Discharged, and 1 which those groups are for transgender LGBTIQ, and the other, if I may use the word, was mainstream. So where are we from here? So we've achieved quite a lot in the last 4 months. The steering group now has become a formal alliance. We have branded the program. There's a clear roadmap through the development of a strategic plan with key milestones. You met the program coordinator, which her role will be to ensure the execution of what we've listed in the strategic plan. We have a designated space that has been created on Connect Group's website as part of establishing a true presence of the program, and as I said, giving it a home and a one-stop shop. 3 of the original facilitators have undertaken the train-a-trainer course via Zoom. It took a lot for them. They had to go through training from America across a 10-day period, 2 hours. They had to deal with the time difference, which is a lot. And now what is so exciting is that WA has 3 accredited trainers. So what does that mean? The intent, which I'm glad to see such a high representation of NGOs, the intent is to engage with the NGO sector and to embed the Alternatives to Suicide peer groups as part of their service delivery. The Alliance will ensure the integrity of the model, provide debriefing to the facilitators, provide ongoing training outside of the model itself to ensure the long-term sustainability of the new groups that we believe will be formed. And we also have a strong focus because this is part of the learnings, of ensuring the continuous well-being of those facilitators. Clarifying research will be conducted via Curtin University, and what clarifying evaluation means, it's that it takes place early in the delivery of the program, and the purpose is to provide knowledge that identifies and documents the essential dimensions of the program to make them explicit to the stakeholders. So given that Alternatives to Suicide is a new and developing innovation, then this approach is the most suitable one to undertake. So basically what we hope that the research will assist us with is defining clearly the program rationale and purpose, producing insight into how the program is being developed, insight into how the program, define its theoretical, ethical, and other guiding principles, and define the program's intended outcomes. So really make clear what aspects of the program may need modification and lay the groundwork for future evaluations, which are centered around impact and outcomes. So it's really quite exciting to see that we're at that point where we're in a complete implementation stage. We have on the ground those trainers. We are transitioning to train 16 new facilitators in WA, and therefore the Curtin University research will be working with those new groups as they become established. I always need to say this because when we talk about any programs that deal with suicide, that sit under suicide prevention, there's always a bit of a risk from government, always has sort of like a bit of a risk factor. So in order to address that, Connect Groups has actually become an accredited QIC organization. And to sort of make you understand what that means is we have exactly the same level of accreditation of the Mental Health Commission. So, and we're small. We're under 1 mil a year. And, we're just a group of 6.5 FTE. So it took a lot of work to reach this, but it was done with the thought that we need to demonstrate that there is strong governance, there's strong risk evaluation systems in place, which will legitimize the model and the program as a whole. So it was a really thought through investment, and also falls part of the role that we play in really elevating the role of peer support groups in WA. So it has been a mammoth effort, but something that all those within the Alliance believe in and are absolutely dedicated to see its rollout. And, you know, Joe Kalia will later come on stage and be part of the QA panel and really speak about, it's not only about the rollout in WA, it's, you know, this is important for Australia. I have purposely alluded to the model as I believe that Leo and Trish, which shortly are going to join us on the stage, are best placed, as they have been facilitating the group since 2018, and they have recently become the accredited trainers. They will each share their stories and journey and knowledge gained, and then we will provide with an opportunity for questions. So I'd like to invite Trish, and reading her bio, you can come up. So Trish Tran sees herself as a change agent and knows that the alchemy of hope metabolizes lives. Starting off as a student nurse, can I have a seat? We're going to keep you comfortable. Starting off as a nurse at Royal Brisbane Hospital at the tender age of 19, Trish began to see how health professionals gave tragic and devastating news so often that they sometimes became desensitized to how it impacted others. Trish then moved into admin and managerial roles, working at Swan District Hospital, RPH, PMH, and community-based child and adolescent health services. Trish has been a partner of how lives can be marred by illness, distress, and tragedy, and how these scars can be mitigated by relationship. It was an easy decision for Trish to move into peer support, working for North Metropolitan Mental Health. Within 3 months, she was working as their peer support coordinator at Greylands Hospital, and within 2 years, she was acting peer support coordinator. This is an executive position where she was responsible for the strategic direction and day-to-day operations of peer work in North Metro Mental Health. Nowadays, what are you, Trish? You're a seasonal, sensational, sessional, I was going to say sensational, I'm going to say sensational lecturer at Curtin University, because she is sensational, and an NDIS support worker at Helping Minds. She's also an educator at WA Recovery College and Alliance, a certified personal medicine coach and trainer, certified by the highly regarded Dr. Pat Deegan, and she runs her own online coaching business and is a peer supervisor registered with the Centre of Mental Health Learning. So just in case, then she decided to take this on board. So she completed her facilitator training in 2018 and is now an official accredited trainer. Can we just put our hands together? I'd also like to invite Leo. So Leo is a Perth-based peer support worker, currently completing a Bachelor of Psychology at Curtin University. Alongside Emory, in 2018, Leo co-funded WA's first peer-led non-clinical suicide support organization within the model of ATS, Discharged. In their role at Discharge, Leo has gathered years of experience co-facilitating alternatives to suicide peer support groups, people experiencing suicidal thoughts, feelings, or actions. In 2019, they acted as a lived experience researcher on Curtin's approved evaluation of these groups. This involved them co-designing the project as well, and leading as well as leading elements of data collection, data analysis, and report write-up. In addition to running groups, Leo also co-facilitated various trainings to help others engage with people in suicide distress. As a result of the Alternatives to Suicide program, they've become a certified Alternatives to Suicide facilitator training and look forward to advancing suicide peer support across the nation. Passionate, he's very passionate They are very passionate about making a difference in the lives of those in need, and Leo will always be dedicating to finding new ways to heal and grow, both as an individual and as part of the collective. Emery wishes to present his apologies today, but unfortunately he wasn't well, and we all have to stick to the COVID, so as soon as you have a little bit of a cough, it's better. But I do want to read his bio, because he's been equally an integral part of this program, has been part of the steering group and now the alliance alongside Leo. Emery is a young advocate who co-founded Discharge, WA's first suicide support organization. He is currently studying a Bachelor of Social Science and is dedicated to empowering trans and gender diverse people through his work with Trans Folk of WA. For the last 3 years, Emery has co-facilitated the Alternatives to Suicide peer support group and delivered training in how to engage people with distress. He too is now a certified trainer and looks forward to working with Connect groups to advance this community-based approach to suicidal distress. So, though he's not here, we're videoing this for him. So now we move to the part which is really going to be most engaging for all of you, because you're going to hear the stories from the field. And their recounts of how they became involved and how these groups run is really what you want to hear, rather than my side, which is the Alliance's side, which is around that coordinated sort of strategy that we do. So we're part of that governance, that strategic intent, but it's people such as Leo and Trish, which are going to be the drivers, and those that we, and the new ones that we put at the end of the room. If you're interested in finding out how to implement the program in your NGO, you just need to sign up and we'll be in touch with you. And if you're interested in becoming a facilitator, there's also a form where you can just sign up and then we'll send it to you. So I'm just going to leave you now to Trish and then to Leo. Thank you.
And now, do you want us to fiddle stand? Do you want us to fiddle?
However you feel best.
What would you folks like?
You become sit down.
Hi folks, can you hear me?
Then you just go up to the front.
Hi, I'm Trish. How are you? Thank you for coming. It's so important. I'm so glad to see you all here. I just want to first take note that we're standing on Wujak Noongar land. I pay respect to my elders, past, present and emerging, and recognise that sovereignty was never ceded. So my story and how did I get here, my learnings, my facilitator roles, training. I want to take back to when I was suicidal and my experience of help seeking and that terrible time there, because that will show you why I fell into this approach. So one of the things that I did as a person, when you're suicidal, you go to your doctor, you get funneled into the system, and what I found is that I was being diagnosed without being heard. I had labels put on me, I had hospitalizations, but I was invisible in the process. People were so busy looking at my risk, how likely was I actually to kill myself. So a lot of the conversations was, how often have you been eating? Have you lost weight, gained weight? Have you been sleeping? What's your mood like? Do you get the same joy out of things that you usually do? These things didn't relate to what I was experiencing. They didn't relate to my narrative. That was something else that was placed on. It was almost like I wasn't seen in the system. And so when people have had trauma or other experiences, they often have power imbalances in their life, where the people that haven't been heard, their experiences haven't been valued, and nobody's checked in with them, are you okay? And that was actually what I was experiencing going through this help seeking, that there was no, are you okay, tell me what's happening, like you did tell your story, but it was almost like a side thing that wasn't really as important, the risk, are you actually going to do it? Was actually the case. in preparing for this, I was actually looking up some research from 2016 that came out of University of New South Wales. And in that research, it talked about the fact that a meta-analysis of the data had shown that 50% of all people placed in a low-risk category actually go on to take their life, whereas 95% of those in a high-risk category receiving the support for whatever, only 5% actually end up taking their life. So the meta-analysis showed that the risk assessment side of things, it doesn't work. It doesn't reliably predict who is or who will not take their life. At best, it's a flip of the coin. And that really was something that was, yes, that's true. Like, I felt confused. I felt like that I didn't have anyone noticing whether I was serious or not. I couldn't even explore that because I was just too busy answering the questions. And what I've noticed as well is that it was not the system that helped me find my way out. In the dark, stumbling, trying to find the door, whether it was to life or to death, I had to find that way myself. Thankfully, I found the right door handle that brought me back to life, and that I'm really grateful for. So moving on, you know, obviously working as my story tells, I moved into peer work, and as we was in peer work, I also became involved in Curtin University in their program called Lived Experience Educator Unit. And from there, I met a lot of great networks. And out of that network, I found out about this alternatives to suicide approach. Now I was like, the system's broken, man. It doesn't see the people. You kind of just feel like you're a cog in a big wheel, and you just sort of spun around and spat out and come back and spun around. And then I heard that the guy that brought Hearing Voices to Australia was the one that had flagged this one. And I'm like, man, Hearing Voices is perfect. I don't know what this stuff is, but I'm in because this is going to be it. So I went in, I did the training, and as I did the training to become a facilitator, I literally felt the earth move. It was like the whole sense of the biomedical model and the approach to human distress fell away, and I found something which was, this my soul knows to be true. This will work. And some of the things that I learned when I was doing this facilitator training, I learned about things like everybody will feel suicidal in the right context, in the right history. It is a natural response to life and relationships. The person is not broken. The person does not need to be fixed. The person needs to be heard. The person needs to be able to explore that which is driving them to death. Is it a language? Death is often a language that we use because we don't have the words to say something's out of balance, something needs to end, something needs to be different in my life. And so this is what the approach is. It's giving people the chance to explore, to delve in, to find what it is for them. But if you have risk assessments, if my role is to protect you from killing yourself, I can't truly hear you because I'm too busy assessing you. I'm too busy trying to figure out if it's safe to let you walk through that door. And as a result, if I can't hear you, you can't feel safe to talk. And so this is what I like about the approach, is the approach says, I'm here, I'm listening. I recognise your authority and your capacity to determine yourself. I was reading a while back, way back, where it's talked about when somebody decides to act, they said, this is it, my life is going to end. Before they actually do the task, there's a window, a small window. And in that window, if you have connection, if you have somebody that genuinely connects with you, will do one of two things. It will delay a person's hand, or it will stop it completely. And I'm not saying that's this approach. This is definitely, if we even say that's the approach, we've taken the power away and putting it back on the facilitators. It's this releasing of the fear that we have of keeping someone alive at all costs. I know when I was being kept alive at all costs, it felt like that didn't matter how much torture I was in, just that I was breathing, and that felt deeply invalidating. So after I did the facilitator training, there's a group of us, and the lovely Emery opened up his house for us to come and chat, and he was already running the flagship with the trans section, and we were able to explore and create and connect, and then I met the amazing Leo, and then I was brought in kind of like for the mainstream facilitation of an open group within Marangaroo. Now, in that group, I actually had the deep honour of listening to many people speak about difficult attachments with children, and not even being able to express it. I heard them speak about loss of manhood and loss of identity, and I heard them speak about disconnection from self so thoroughly that they just couldn't bear to be in their skin. And I sat with them, with my co-facilitator, and we explored and we asked questions, never wanting to fix the person, because that's not our role. Our role is to listen. And when I let them, well, when I say let, when they left the group and I walked out the door, I let my fear for them, my concern, because they were genuinely nice people, go as well. And they returned the next week. And we continued to have conversations, and that is just such an honour when you see somebody coming back the door, because I think that there's something worthwhile in that group, something that held them for that week to come back. But that's just something that's just amazing. And so, you know, I also within my life, a mother, a grandmother, have special needs grandson, a lot of things. And so, you know, one of the things about facilitators is we also grow and evolve as well. So, you know, all those balls in the air juggling, COVID hits, we go online. We're no longer doing a face-to-face group. And that was a big shift. It was like really hard for people to sort of feel comfortable with that online when everything's in lockdown. Sadly, the group sort of fizzled out at that stage, and my caring roles, it kind of exploded. I needed to sort of take time off work and really get my family organised. But the vision never died. The vision never died. And then training came to become Train the Trainer. Like, let's spread this, let's make this burn the world through. And I came in and I did it, and the same world shift hit me again about how important this approach is, how different this is, and how very much needed it is. So I'm now a trainer, and I thank Helping Minds for it, because they paid for me. They've been one of the big supporters. They've paid for a lot of a couple of other facilitators to do the training alongside of me. They've paid for me to attend the group, and they're paying for me to be here. That's how much they see this vision as actually being important to the human contact, human relationship. So without much ado, I'm going to hand over to the lovely Leo, but I just want to say that this approach is something that is so different, because it drops power and it starts to see the person. Thank you so much for listening.
After Leo, you can hold your questions, and we will create so much time so that you can ask them, to go in more in depth around the model as well. Leo, are you going to stay there, or do you want to come here? Okay, Leo.
Hello. I've been public speaking for so long, since high school, but it's still just as terrifying as the very first time I ever did it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about sort of my pathway into alternatives to suicide, and I'm going to speak a little bit to some of the things that Emery was going to touch on, because I feel like those are really important things to share with everybody. So Emery at the time was manager of Transfocus WA. Now he is the vice chair, so he's really made his way up there. But it was when the Trans Pathways, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with the findings from the Trans Pathways report came out, that he was absolutely shocked to see the 1 in every 2, so half, almost 50% of trans people in Australia have attempted suicide. So that is a really, really ridiculously high rate, and he had this position of power within a peer organisation. He'd heard about the Alternatives to Suicide Facilitator training, so he went for getting involved, and he knew that it was an approach that needed 2 co-facilitators, and that's when he recruited me to come along with him. Because I have been doing the peer support within the LGBT community, working at Freedom Centre for a couple of years prior. So we did that training together, and he created Discharged, which is actually an acronym, and it's Alternatives to Suicide. It has a charter for running the groups. It doesn't have the strict rules. It has a charter with lots of values to follow. And he took some of the really key words from that charter and he created the name Discharged, and that stands for deserving of inclusion, support, community, hope, authenticity, I can't remember the R, but the D is dignity. Respect. Oh, the easiest one, respect, yes. So that's what our name actually means. And we started our first group in 2018 of May, so we went straight from the training, pretty much started our first group, and we were really lucky because we had that organisational support from Transfocus WA, has lots of partnerships within the community because everyone wants to be supporting the trans community. So we had venues and insurance and all of that stuff to back us up, so it was very easy to get us off the ground. We also had a ready pool of people to advertise the groups too, because we have the online peer social groups for Transfocus WA. Those are private, but we were able to advertise in there, and so we were very successful even our first group was very successful. So Emery recruited me because he knew that I had the peer support experience working at Freedom Centre. And it was very challenging. I think a lot of people underestimate how challenging a peer role can be, especially within a population that is so rife with distress. We're really not equipped to be dealing with the level of distress and the need that is within that community. So what this training was like for me, as you heard, I have a bit more of the clinical background, being a psych student and all that sort of stuff, and I've also done multiple assist trainings and mental health first aid trainings, so that's really my background. And the training for me was incredibly challenging. It really, as Trish said, the ground sort of moves beneath you. It shook my worldview a lot and made me nervous, I think, as well, about going out into the community and running these groups. But it also felt like the most natural thing of really stripping away all these layers of fear and control and power that we've sort of chucked on ourselves in these clinical ways, and stripping that back to the more human approach and just meeting someone as a person to person. And that felt like the most natural way to move forward. It was interesting because while I was running these groups and really getting this experience talking with people about suicide, I was also still working at Freedom Centre, and the model that we use there to address suicide is the assist model. But I think a lot of people are quite scared, and we found that the peers that work there weren't really that equipped to be having those conversations. And so with my knowledge from Alternatives to Suicide, I sort of went in there and I ran a little mini training to sort of teach people how to talk about suicide, and sort of using the assist as that leaping off point as well. And what I heard after that was, I can actually talk to people and not be so scared. I think the assist was really leaving people feeling really scared and not knowing how to have that conversation, whereas I can come in and say, this is the value of having human connection, and people really relate to it because it's in us all. It's that ability to relate. So the facilitating groups for me was an incredible experience. It's something that's very transformative for yourself as well as a facilitator. I've made so much more meaning from my own personal experiences with my trauma history and also my suicide attempt history, and also living with thoughts myself. Just from listening to the people who come along, because they have a wealth of expertise in their own lives and their own experiences, and being able to listen to them and the meaning they make from their experiences, or to even just have conversations with a group. It just changed my view of myself as well, which is just absolutely profound. I would say it was very profound for me. And when we moved into COVID, that was obviously very challenging because we couldn't run our face-to-face groups anymore, but because we had that population that really needed that support, we were really lucky that we could throw together a quick grant, and we got some money from BMI National to help us transition to Zoom, which was really, really lucky. We're so grateful for that grant. And that helped us to get a Zoom account going and to figure out amongst ourselves, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make this go on Zoom? And it was, for our trans group, it was incredibly successful. We were reaching people all across Australia. We had people from regional parts of Australia as well, people from all the big cities, Queensland, New South Wales, Adelaide, Victoria as well. And the online group was just, it was almost swamped by the amount of people that came along. So the need and the demand is very, very present within that community as well. We still keep our online group now as well, so we're back in person for our group. And we run that out of a little community organisation in West Leaderville. But we also have our online group too, because it's really, it's so important to be connecting with the interstate people who don't have these groups going at the moment. And we did move online for the mainstream broader community group, but that it wasn't as successful, unfortunately, as the trans one. So yeah. And in amongst that, you would have heard Antonella mention as well that we were very lucky to receive a grant from Connect Groups to do an evaluation of the groups that we were running. So that started before COVID. That was in 2019, and that was led by me and Emery. It was a lived experience-led approach, which was exactly what this Alternatives to Suicide needed, rather than replicating those sorts of power dynamics that exist within the mental health system that often also exist in the research system as well. So we were able to collect the data, run the interviews. We also analysed the data as well. Alongside, we got some research skills training, and I had a bit of that as well from my psych degree. And some of those findings were absolutely incredible. So what we already knew as well were that one of our major findings was that all people need is someone to talk to, and that was a no-brainer. Of course, we knew that already, and we also heard a lot about what one of the participants, one of our group attendees, called a knee-jerk reaction, which is sort of that movement from having a conversation to immediately go into risk assessment, or you go into the welfare check, or you go into the and that shuts down the conversation. That moves people into silence. That was one of our key findings as well. But having that safe place to talk openly about suicide without facing that knee-jerk reaction from either the community members, like family and friends and stuff like, because it was common there as well. People are actually gaining way more personal control over themselves. They're getting more self-determination, and they're making all this new meaning from their experience. It's just the same as we are as facilitators. But what surprising findings we had, which personally surprised me, was that the people who come along to the groups were actually using the groups as a means to stay alive. So what was coined the stretch goal by our participants was having that space to be able to talk openly about suicide and be witnessed and be heard and seen and valued as an individual with your own autonomy was something that people wanted to hold on to life for. So we were having people say, I know that the next group is coming up, so I can hold on for just that little bit longer. And we also heard that people were doing that even if they weren't coming to the groups. Just knowing that the group was there in the background was a reason for like, okay, if I can just stay alive until this point, it's going to be okay. There also another ways that people were utilising the group to stay alive was the relationships that are built within the group. So people are also staying alive for each other because we sort of created this little community within a community in a way where people are, where we're really connecting with each other, and it's almost like we want to continue to show up for each other because we know this community is really important to all of us, and the devastation of one of us having died is really keeping everyone holding on for each other as well. It was also really shifting the ways that everyone was seeking support. So people were, because they had all experienced these knee-jerk reactions within the mental health system, they had shut down and were no longer seeking that support. But once they had engaged with us for a while and we talked things through, they actually realised what a meaningful support could look like, and then they were able to go and seek that specifically from the people who they know would be able to provide it. So it's sort of like we had given a blueprint of what meaningful support can look like for people, and that was a really groundbreaking one. I'll just give you two more of these findings. I feel like this is a little bit too much, but I just find them very exciting. The other one is we don't use trigger warnings in group, which is sort of contrary to what is becoming more popular at the moment, and that is because there's not too much evidence to suggest that a trigger warning is actually effective for reducing distress in any way. So we are talking about triggering content. Of course, we're talking about death and what's driving us towards death. So people are triggered in our groups. But what we heard was that they're actually utilising their own triggers as a means to heal, and it's not actually leading to further traumatisation. Like, everyone can assume that if you're not using a trigger warning, you're going to be traumatising someone or re-traumatising someone. But people are saying, oh, this is a signpost here for me to continue to figure out what's going on for me and understand myself and move through my distress, so it's sort of getting that comfort within individual distress. And finally, there was this change in the relationship with the suicidal thoughts. So we know we're not stopping people from killing themselves. We are not removing the suicidal thoughts. But what's happening is actually the relationship with the suicidal thoughts is changing. So people are becoming more able to look at it as the canary in the mine. Something's out of balance. What does this represent for me? And that's really, really exciting because it is prolonging the time between having a suicidal thought and making an attempt, if there is an attempt at all. A lot of the time, by that point, people will come back to group and are talking about it. This report, I'm not sure if anyone's seen it or if anyone's read our research, but this report was a really big leaping off point for us as well. It's triggered a research project that's happening overseas. It's sort of a replicating one, which we're helping co-design at the moment as well, behind the scenes. So I think alternatives to suicide is big. It's gaining more traction, and it's a really important way forward to, I guess, as I said at the start, it's about shedding all of those layers that we've put on ourselves, all of that heavy weight of the risk and the fear. It's about shedding those layers, and that is the way forward. I think that's all I really wanted to say about this, and I thank you for listening.
I omitted to say that if any of the content that is being disclosed, if you're feeling impacted by any way, can you please make your way where we can support you, both Amanda and Rena. We have mental health first aid training, so I'm ready to say that at the beginning. I'm just going to invite Joe onto the stage, and then we're going to open up for questions. So I'm going to read Joe's biography. This is Joe. Does everybody know Joe? Oh, there. He didn't even use this. Look, he's showing off. He's showing off that he's going to the gym. So just a brief presentation. Joe is the principal of Recovery Matters, a mental health and suicide prevention intervention advocacy group. He was, as I said, the CEO of Richmond Fellowship from July 2005 to 2016. One day they'll read mine like that as well, Joe. Previously, the principal social worker in child protection in WA and the senior executive service of the Justice Department in WA. He introduced, as I said, the Hearing Voices approach from Europe when he was CEO of Richmond Wellbeing, and is now committed to introducing the Alternatives to Suicide approach, which has Hearing Voices framework as its foundation. He provides a consultancy to organizations and is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and a life member of both the Australian Association of Social Workers and the Australian College of Social Work. I really need to state that Joe, all the work that Joe is doing and has been doing is purely pro bono. And so I'm going to ask you a question, Joe. Where does that passion, motivation, determination come from?
Is this working?
No.
No?
I think it's on. Yeah, try again.
Try again? No. No. Here. Almost.
It's working.
It's working?
Yeah,
Okay.
but you-
He showed off that he could jump on.
In acknowledging the land that we're meeting on, I also want to point out that the Alternatives to Suicide approach is very culturally safe, and we established that in 2017 when the trainers first came to Perth, and I think that's really important. We're hoping that this project might also make a contribution to the work in the Aboriginal area. What was your question?
What was your driving force?
Well, I'd have to say some of that driving force is here today. Where's Lynn Margaret? Here she is. When I first started at Richmond in 2005, within about 2 weeks, Lynn, who was a consultant, consumer consultant out there, came to see me and pinned me down about engaging more with peer experiencing, building on the work that she and others, Bill Bennett and others, were doing. So really I was introduced into the whole area of lived experience by people like Lynn, and I came from a sector where mental health intersected, child protection and then justice. And when I stepped into this sector, I felt as though I'd stepped back in time because of the abuse of human rights and the absolute determination, really, of professionals to control and be in control and not listen. So the link for me was actually created from a lived experience platform. And if anyone's ever had a negotiation with Lynn Marby, you know that you're up against a fairly tough end result. So does that answer the...
Yes, that answers the question. Can I just ask you, just if you could also, propel us a little bit around, because this vision, which obviously is the Alliance vision, but I always think you best speak to it, is where do you see this model? How do you see its implementation? Do you see this role within WA or broader? And do you want to talk a little bit about the partners that we formed through these years?
Sure. I guess I want to start by saying that when I saw the workshop in Spain, in the World Hearing Voices Congress, I came back knowing that I was leaving Richmond and I was actually really going to not be as active in the broader sectors. So I immediately contacted the Mental Health Commission and spoke to Louise Howe, who again is one of the key players that's enabled this process to continue, because she's been a point of reference the whole time. But also to Lynn Millett, who is down the back there.
She had to leave.
Oh, yes, she had to leave. Yes, she had some family duties that had come up. But she and Chris Hall, who was the CEO of Mercy Care, agreed to take on a showcase approach to introducing the alternatives to suicide approach in WA. Even though their organisation did not engage in any suicide prevention activities, their view was that their mission was to break the cycles of disadvantage, and they saw how significant this approach was, and they had seen at Richmond Wellbeing the introduction of the Hearing Voices approach and how that actually was contributing to transforming lives. So once we actually had that 2017 activity, we then decided that we needed to form a steering group to oversee how much further we could go, and that's where we worked on the basis of bringing in lived experience organisations, Helping Mind, Conway, Connect groups. Mercy Care stayed in for another year or so, but were very clear that they would be withdrawing but continuing to support. The work that we did here in 2017 was the first time that the Alternatives to Suicide approach was run in any other country. And in fact, it mirrored the work of the Hearing Voices Network, where the Hearing Voices Network, which always met in Europe for the previous 27 years, met for the first time here in Perth. So we can claim, although we're an isolated city, we're actually fairly innovative. And the leadership that we're showing now is enormous, and I think I'd like to, I'm probably deviating a little bit, but before I leave today, I really want to commend Lottery West, Pauline and Lorna, for the commitment Lottery West has shown, because they showed a similar commitment with the introduction of the Hearing Voices approach, which drew the ire of a traditional kind of system with mental health, but Lottery West was brave enough and visionary enough to see actually you need to listen to everyone's voice, and that's what they're doing with this project as well.
Thank you, Joe. Questions from the floor. This is your opportunity. So if you have a question, if we can just ask you to just come out on that side, just because we're filming, or on the opposite side. Any questions for anyone? You know, if you want to know a little bit more in depth about the program, we can put it to the panel. Yes, so we have a question over here.
I'm just wondering how many places are available for facilitators, as we have to put a submission and have our CEO of our NGO write an order to.
The applications are open. We're looking for up to 20. So it's up to 20 facilitators. We've been told that the best number to train is really around 16, but we do actually have a really good process in place. It's a transparent process. So yes. Yes, thank you.
I'd like to know, Leo, where can we get the report? The report that you were talking about when you...
Yes, the report is actually available on the Alliance section of the Connect Group's website. It's on there. It's also on the Discharge website and Transport WA. So, yeah.
Question at the end?
Hi, Leo. Thank you, panel, for marvellous insights, I think, into this. Thanks very much. What do you think is the main element, Leo, I'm asking you, as to really make somebody feel they've really been listened to? It's that real connect. You know, you talked about all the things that don't work, but in your experience, what element is the real connect, in your opinion?
So what you're talking about is actually the Alternatives to Suicide approach itself. I've sort of, sorry, so there's 4 elements, and this is sort of what is in the training that we do, or that we're going to be doing, sorry. One of them is to validate. That's the first step. And then it doesn't always follow a pathway. You know, it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and right at the centre is that connection. And it's also being curious about what they've been through, asking the questions that can unveil something that maybe they might not have considered before, or helping them to make meaning from an experience that maybe they haven't considered before. Linking with community is also another element of that, and that's not in terms of being a bridge to other services. That's because we're not a further referral sort of place. I mean, we can give referrals if people actually want them, but we're not sending people off to be like, all right, go join your local basketball team now, because that's the way to give yourself community. It's really individually defined of what makes them feel as though they have that purpose again, and that can be such a variety of things. You know, the basketball team or the church group or any variety of things like that.
Trish, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I've finished.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was. I didn't realise it was a pregnant pause.
I'm just trying to remember the word for the last one.
Is it VCV?
Oh, it's vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
Sorry, and that, I can't believe I forgot that. I've been talking about this for years now, and I just forget that. So it's vulnerability is one of the final elements, and that is your own personal vulnerability. It's a little bit like revealing self, showing that you care, showing that you may have been through something similar, and this is the learnings that you got from it. I mean, not in terms of like, this is how you can learn because of what I did, but sort of when I had this experience, this is what happened for me. So those are really the four elements, the perfect recipe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, we had a question. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Kit, and I'm curious if the Alternatives to Suicide approach has another pathway to support introverts and highly sensitive people who are not good in group settings.
Trish, do you want to?
Really no, but we do try to make the space as safe as possible in terms of being non-judgmental, lots of choice of where to sit, so there's always more chairs than people available, you know, giving scope for we've got a tactile table where people can come and fidget things, and there's no expectation that anybody comes. They don't ever have to say a single word. So it's that sense of you can just come and listen and connect through that way, through hearing. We did try the online, which is more likely to be where the introverts may prefer to sit, because you can turn your camera off online. Nobody has to see you. However, at this point, it just didn't work for us. With the Alliance, we may try again.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to add a little bit to that as well with the sensitivities. It's a lot of the time about the environment as well that we're holding the groups. Like Trish said, we always want to have the comfy chairs. We also want to be having low lighting as really, really important. We don't want these fluorescent lights for our groups, because that's really disconnecting. And you know, we have quite a lot of people with autism that come onto groups as well, and these sorts of lights are just a nightmare. I mean, it even gives me a headache. So those are really important things to consider about the environment too. But in terms of getting that individual support, I'd like to maybe say that this is something that could be complementary. You know, we're not going to, this isn't about providing one-on-one support to people, but perhaps there are types of one-on-one support that can be provided that are informed by the Alternatives to Suicide approach.
Thank you. We had a question here.
Thanks. Hi everyone, thank you so much for your continued work in this area. I too am a survivor of complex trauma and several suicide attempts. I'm the founder of Women's Recovery Community. I formed the community 3 years ago as a mum with 3 children under 5 with severe mental health conditions and a recovering addict. And I just couldn't have access to programs like this, so I formed a community. We now support over 1,600 women, of which about 1,100 are in WA. So I really just love that you guys are doing all of this. I have a background, my background's clinical psych and criminology, so well done. I suppose I want to talk with you guys afterwards because I'm forming collaborations with a lot of organisations because I have another job as well, so I don't have time to do all the clinical side. And I just think that this is really giving validity to everybody's search for healing, and the fact that just because you have a history in this area doesn't mean you're incapable of being successful, which was one of my biggest challenges. I suppose my question is, where do you see this program going? How are you going to be connecting with people on the ground? I see that you're really increasing your numbers of facilitators, which is fantastic. So yeah, what's the plans in the future?
Joe, do you want to take that one? Thank you.
Yeah, look, thanks for that. The Train the Trainer course that we ran also included 3 people from Brisbane and 1 from Sydney and 1 from South Australia. They were funded by those organisations, their attendance. There is considerable interest all around Australia in this approach, and in fact when I had a look at and I don't understand how they do this, but they do analytics when you send an email out. When I looked at the analytics, I saw that there was a health board in New Zealand that clicked in or checked in 178 times. So, and New Zealand has indicated interest in this. So I answer that in at 2 levels. Firstly, there is interest in the system generally and deep suspicion, but some openings. And it does remind me of when we introduced the Hearing Voices approach in Australia. We ran the conference in 2008 that Lottery West funded us to run. We had people coming out of the woodwork from all over Australia. People who we don't even know how they knew about it, although we did a lot of marketing. So what I'm saying is that I think the informal networks are spreading there as well. And there is a great strategic plan that Connect Groups has put together. I feel very confident that it will actually find its way much more strongly as the Hearing Voices approach has. The last comment that I want to make is that this approach is the missing link in a continuum in the suicide prevention area. And that's a really important missing link, and I think that if we keep our focus on that, we will get some really good results.
And also to answer that question, you know, when we spoke about the roles that NGOs can play, if we take the example of Trish within Helping Minds, it's around looking at also organisation that part of their service provision sits around the space, obviously, of community mental health. And therefore our role would be to embed the alternatives to suicide model within those organizations to ensure longevity and also referral pathway within that link, that missing link that we're talking about. So there were lots of learnings from the initial 20 facilitators, and therefore what we've learned heavily is the reason that Discharged actually did come about was because trans folk was ready, and therefore they had participants ready to go, whilst other facilitators that went out there without any funding, they thought, well, exactly, how are we going to publicize? So we're really looking at that partnership within the NGO sector, and therefore being able to, you know, to implement it there. And then the blue sky, well, the Alliance says it's not really blue sky, it's to really then seek long-term funding through the Mental Health Commission. One more question?
Sorry, just quickly while I'm here. And Leo, I wanted to thank you for your work. I'm actually a part of your group. So I think that here, I just ask as you guys move forward to really consider, this is where my group, this is where I show my focus, is the people who aren't able to come in. the people who are the introverts can't handle the groups. For me, I needed to create something that someone could be laying in bed, immobile, not able to leave, and can get that connection. But I'm finding now there's a huge amount of people now who are getting better and want to connect. But I just ask you always to keep in your mind that group of people, because I find that it is a really large dynamic.
And I think we should be talking.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, over there. Can you just pass the
It's all right,
microphone?
I have a trainer voice.
You've got a trainer voice, please.
It's all right. Thank you for acknowledging that it is, you said a missing link. I do think that we do have to recognise that suicide and working with suicide is very complicated, and there is no one right response that needs to hold the floor. I do think there is a wonderful space for this, and it has a lot to offer. But I do think one needs to be very careful when you dismiss 35 years of research and peer support advice in how ASSIST develops and works with caregivers, helping them to feel more confident in a space where talking about suicide may be something they've never done before. Please do not refer to it as evoking fear and dismissing it when you talk about bringing something new into the space, because ASSIST does not work with assessing risk. It works with safety and safety for the person, and it really leans into hear story to validate people and to support that.
Yeah. Yes, very sorry about that was probably just miscommunicated on my behalf, but the ASSIST has been incredibly valuable tool for talking about suicide, and that's obviously why it's gained so much traction and has a lot of evidence. And I think the primary difference between ASSIST and alternatives to suicide, because it is very similar, at least in my experience, is that there's none of the safety planning that happens here, because we're not focused on an individual's safety. We're more focused on the relational safety between the group members. That's really our primary focus. But yeah, not to dismiss the absolute validity that ASSIST has definitely gathered and used.
Any other comments from the panel? Joe?
I think it is important to recognise that it is a continuum that we're dealing with, and it's not about either or. But what we do need to recognise with this approach is that the people with the power are the individuals in the group. Yes. And no matter how hard we try, if you have professionals involved that don't have a lived experience in the group, they will try and take the power. And I have a strong commitment, obviously, to the profession of social work. And I remind my colleagues, and I have to say, really, to any professional who is here today, your origins are from the lived experience. Psychology, psychiatry, social work, it didn't just emerge from the swamp, you know. It emerged because people are curious and want to solve problems. And so the professions emerged in order to help solve problems. The problem is today is that they've taken the power and they won't actually relinquish the power and walk alongside somebody. And so ASSIST is important, there's no question, and for some people ASSIST is going to be great. It may not be great for people who have felt as though they've reached out and been damaged by the system. And that's the difference, that people will have, and I'm not saying ASSIST is damaged anyway, what I'm saying is that people have reached out and they've felt damaged. This is actually very safe. Roses in the Ocean, which is a very big lived experience group in this area, based in Brisbane. They've got networks all around Australia, are very strong advocates of ASSIST. What we're saying is that you take one step back from ASSIST and you're here in a pure peer space. And that's really, it's just important to recognise the parameters.
Yeah. The other thing I just want to add in is within our groups, one of the things that we're very big on is accepting whatever framework the person brings in with them. So we're not there trying to tell them one particular pathway is the pathway to be saved. It's about holding that space and that meaning framework of the individual and exploring that, because we all live different lives, we all live different realities, and there's no point trying to shove a different reality onto a person, because it's not, they don't live in it. And that's where we may be a little bit different in terms of a different flower in the garden, because it is this thing that everybody can come into this group with 14 different frameworks of distress and meaning making, and they can all have a conversation together.
Hi, thanks. My name's Ali. You talked about the continuum. There's like the continuum of care, and then there's like the recovery continuum. There's all kinds of continuums. But in these groups, do people? You also talked about like the importance of relationship and connection, and the stretching, the idea of stretching between groups, people who are in increased distress. What happens when someone's finished with the group and they want to leave? And what happens if someone passes away during the group? Like, is there models around that? Like, what happens for transitions out of the group for the people that are still dependent on the group? And dependent might be the wrong word, but yeah.
I guess the first thing is that for me, in my understanding of this, we don't ever take ownership of feeling that a person needs to transition, in terms of the fact that if we have the authorities holding within the individual, they will determine what is needed for them, and we walk alongside them and we explore what that looks like, and they come up with their own solutions and their own answers. It's very much a personal power, not empowerment, but a personal power that we respect and hold. And that is something that really changes the waters in which people swim through when they're in the group, because it's a new thing. It's this responsibility for self, the personal power, the determination. In terms of regarding if anybody completes an act of suicide, throughout the whole functioning of alternatives to suicide, I believe that there's only been two recorded deaths that we know of, and on those occasions they haven't even been part of the group. They've had to move away for work and other reasons, and the information has come back later on. We, as Leo was saying before, we have this sense of feeling connected with each other, and it's almost that connection wants you to stay alive, because you don't want that to happen, like that wave to go on other people. But again, it's about the authority being with the person.
I think Trish pretty much covered it, but I did want to add one of the findings of our research as well was sometimes people are coming to the group and they're fine. They're not feeling suicidal, or they haven't been feeling suicidal for years. And they want to come to the groups because they want to be witnesses as well, and they know what being a witness means to someone else who's in distress. So there's also that element of people who are coming to groups, that it's not always about everyone is everyone is struggling. Is that other people, if they're still okay and they keep coming back, they're also fulfilling the supportive role in the group as well. And because the responsibility of holding the group is shared with everyone, it's not just held by the facilitators. We're kind of like glorified group participants, really. Not to undermine the incredible skills that we have, but everyone shares that responsibility of keeping that group going.
Any other questions? Yes? There, and then Rena over there.
Hello there. Sorry, is this on? I can't
Yes.
hear myself. Okay, great. I'm not really sure what my question is, but I guess it's a little bit hard for me to divorce, like, I guess a risk assessment. I don't even like to think of it like that, but the rescuer in me finds it hard not to worry about people. You know, if you're seeing someone in the group who's really distressed, if someone storms out, like, yeah, how do you handle when you're worried about someone's safety?
I've had a couple of occasions where that very thing has happened, where they've actually said this is it, this is the end, see you later. And you do things like, you know, you be genuine and not saying, well, I really, really hope to see you again because you mean something to me, and you know, but you don't shackle their feet and leave them. And honestly, the first time that happens, you feel uncomfortable until you can have another conversation. And sometimes people will leave group and never come back. And you wonder, well, have they moved on with their life? You know, where are they at? And it's this sense of unknown that you start to hold on to and embrace, because again, if I give you the responsibility to control your life, if I'm feeling discomfort, it's because I've taken that responsibility from you. And so when I start to feel that, I go, oh, doing it again, give it back. And that's it. It really, when you release that, you become really present to the individual.
I think Trish said that very eloquently, but I just wanted to share a couple of experiences that I've had as a facilitator in group when these sorts of situations come up. So it is very, very much like that. The first time that you have someone come along who's dead set, it is very scary because you're a person, and I'm also a rescuer, so I completely understand that discomfort. And I love the way that Trish says it is I've taken that responsibility then if I'm uncomfortable. But I've had someone come along to group who was on their way, who said, this is the last thing that I'm doing for myself. This is the first and last thing that I'm doing for myself, coming to this group to being able to talk about it. And we were so worried we were never going to see them again. But then they came back the next week, and then the next week, and now they're one of our facilitators as well. So it's actually a lot more empowering than maybe some people think, to give that power to someone. I'll give back their power, I guess. And also, even just this week, had a similar situation happen, and I just stuck around for an extra 15 minutes after group and just chatted with this person, and myself and Emery, we just continued the conversation. Or we've even got to the end, we've closed the group, and someone said, no, like, I'm really feeling, I don't feel safe, I guess. And the whole group just stayed and continued on that conversation, because that responsibility is shared and everyone cares about everyone. So yeah, that's the sort of ways that things manifest in groups. Yeah.
So we've got one more question. Was it here? Yes, thank you.
Jo, I just wanted to ask about your comment that the groups are culturally appropriate, and wondering if there's been some work done with Aboriginal communities, if that extends to cold, if you're looking at specific groups or like a specific cold group, or if all groups are designed to be inclusive. Just wondering if you could explore that a little bit, please.
Sure, yeah. In 2017, when we brought the trainers over for the first time, we had Dawn Besserat from UWA, who's an associate professor of social work and Aboriginal person. She was on the group. She arranged for the facilitators to meet with a number of elders and developed a workshop with the elders, and it was very successful and very, they were very interested and very supportive. Very much the same as the Hearing Voices approach. Now, unfortunately, Dawn, because of her role at UWA, when we were running the second year, which was in March, that was the beginning of the academic term, she just simply couldn't engage. So we are going to pick up on the Aboriginal connection, but we just have to find the right time. There's a lot of money that's gone into Aboriginal suicide prevention, as you'd be aware. Probably as the project develops, we'll then reconnect with Pat Dudgeon and Dawn and others and see if we can actually make a connection. Okay. Now, in terms of the cold area, it's an important connection there as well. I think at some stage during the project, we will actually start to put out feelers within the core community, organisations like Multicultural Futures, for example, which have huge grassroots connections, and others. So it's sort of one step at a time, but we do know it is actually culturally safe. because the feedback has come back from at least the Aboriginal community. And we're talking about universal truths here. We're talking about trust and safety and so on. So it's about us, this project, then being able to connect with those groups in a way that has the meaning for that particular kind of cultural context. Does that answer you?
Yeah. So, we've got to put into context also that, we've only, no, I'm not going to say only, sorry, Colleen. It's only an 18-month program. So what is important for us at the moment is the first step was having WA trainers. The next one is to create the pool of the facilitators, and the next phase is to find those organizations, those NGOs, and our support group members themselves that are interested in embedding the program. And that means that we would be providing them with the 2 facilitators, and then the trainers would actually be shadowing those trainers and providing that debrief, and then we'd be providing debrief to the trainers. So we've looked at all that sort of continuum. So that is where we want to be with the research alongside us, which will then hopefully propel us towards that ultimate goal of having recurrent funding to be able to continue, and then all those other kind of conversations will sort of follow. So we're trying to get things done within a really limited amount of time, but we're feeling really confident around the take-up around this. And we're also well aware that there's always going to be a lot of questions around this because of the way of the integrity of the model. And that's something that, we've actually entered into a memorandum of understanding with Wildflower. So it is their model, and we're implementing, and we're really strong around maintaining that integrity and not changing the way. That's why the whole process is as it is. The facilitators will be trained on the model so that they'll be joining them in the future. If there's no more questions, I feel like you've been sitting for a very, very long time. We have some wonderful lunch boxes at the back. We decided that we were doing the whole COVID safe, and also we know that when people end up in a conversation, they're hungry, they don't know what to do, so there's actually boxes and you can sort of mingle. As I said, at the back of the room, if you're an NGO and would like us to come and do a presentation within your organization with your teams, please put your name down and Rena will be in touch with you. And what that looks like is we first come and have a chat, and then we come with the trainers as well, so that the team can ask those questions, which you clearly can see I would have never been able to answer. So just letting you know that no one from the Alliance, you have to have lived experience to be part of the facilitation training. So none of us have been able to have that sort of insight other than what you sort of hear, and we've asked them how the training went. And if you are a person with a lived experience and are interested in becoming a facilitator, again, sign up or just come and speak to any of us today. Can I just ask to put your hand together for these wonderful champions? And I'd like to thank you all. It's as I said from the very beginning, it's really uplifting to see this level of interest towards something that the Alliance and those with a lived experience have been working towards. So thank you very much for joining us, and enjoy lunch and networking. Thank you.